Hello everybody. So this is probably going to be my least viewed video of the week, but it's okay because Spirit Airlines has been on my mind. I've been wanting to talk about this, since the start of the day because of course they are shutting down operations. They are done. Spirit Airlines is done. 17,000 people losing their jobs. And the title of this video is it the return of moral hazard? Which, if it is, I'm very happy about that. Capitalism, there are supposed to be consequences for operating a business wrong. And Spirit had a lot of issues. Like, there were a lot of customer complaints. There were a lot of issues that Spirit had that, say, other airlines didn't necessarily have. There were a bunch of issues with Spirit. And them going out is the return of consequences. And I think this is healthy. The problem that I have is that Spirit could have been fixed if the merger with JetBlue had been allowed to go through. Capitalism was doing its job 2 years ago with the better performing company at the time trying to acquire the less well performing company and presumably trying to fix it. And JetBlue, by the way, has very good customer reviews. JetBlue is usually seen pretty highly. JetBlue could have fixed Spirit Airlines. JetBlue could have done that. Like, when you have a merger, typically the better management goes in, and Spirit would have had a shot. It would have been not only a financial injection, but also an injection of management and a change of strategy. And if you had let capitalism act the way it's supposed to, that merger should have gone through. But unfortunately, somebody blocked that merger back 2 years ago. And what's going on? Do I agree with Peter Schiff? I don't recognize myself. Oh my goodness. Peter Schiff talking back to a U.S. senator here. Why did you block the JetBlue Spirit Airlines merger? The combined company would have been better competition than JetBlue alone. Now Spirit is gone. Now Spirit is gone thanks to your intervention. And by the way, if you look at JetBlue is likely to be next, by the way. They're not doing very well either if you look up JetBlue. While both companies, if they had been allowed to merge, we will never know, but they could have still been around, and many of the issues of Spirit Airlines could have been fixed by way of a merger, which by the way, if you follow the airline industry, oftentimes there's been successful mergers in the airline industry. I'm thinking about Continental and United. I'm thinking about, that was, I don't want to say smooth, but it worked. And a bigger company emerged. So you could have had a bigger low cost giant, and then who knows? Maybe that low cost giant would have merged with Southwest, and maybe we would have had like a low cost giant if only capitalism has been allowed to go through. And so what I'm upset about is that it seems that we go through periods of Keynesianism, right? Keynesianism is what? Is interventionism to save jobs. Right, injecting money to save jobs, aka GM in 2008. That's Keynesianism and capitalism and pure capitalism. And of course, I fundamentally believe Keynesianism is very, very flawed. But the rules of the game are not static. They're not set. So to me, when I look at Spirit, Spirit was killed by randomness. It was killed by randomness. It was not because that merger would have saved the company. And so this is why it hits different for, I think, a lot of people commenting on this. I see a lot of Bitcoiners commenting on this. And as a Bitcoiner, it's very, very annoying. I'm happy that the current administration, in the end, decided not to bail out Spirit. This is good for the dollar. This is good for consequences. This is good for moral hazard, and this is consistent with capitalism. But we should have allowed them to merge. And Spirit Spirit has all of the rights to be upset about this, because that merger could have fixed them. The odds would have been high that merger would have fixed them. And we seem to be going on through periods of capitalism on and capitalism off period that are entirely random. And I bring out this question: why did we bail out Silicon Valley Bank's customers? What is this randomness? We gotta be consistent. Do you get a bailout or do you not get a bailout? We bailed out Silicon Valley's customers, right? It got absorbed by the bigger banks. The BTFP program, the Bank Term Funding Program, which was monetary printing for more than 170 billion, was it something like this, to bail out Silicon Valley Bank? So why did they get a bailout? And Spirit didn't. That's why I think hard money fixes this. Bitcoin fixes. If you can't print money out of thin air, you remove the power or lack of power from single decision makers, and you decentralize the decision making to nodes enforcing the protocol. And the nodes enforcing the protocol means that capitalism is always on. Capitalism is not off for certain periods, right? The airlines were bailed out, and I still don't think I can say what happened in 2020 on YouTube, so I'm not going to say. But based on the events of 2020, there was a bailout in 2020, $62 billion, right? So what if a mismanaged company just happened by virtue of luck, just happened to be in bad shape in 2021? By virtue of luck, right? They would have gotten a bailout, and assuming that need for a bailout was not related to the events of 2020, but related to like decades of mismanagement. So and this is a problem for companies. Like, companies don't know if they should be anti-fragile or not. Should you do a bunch of share buybacks, or should you save the cash in case there's bad times? Well, you don't know. If you saved the cash to survive bad times, and there is a bailout, well, guess what? You saved your cash for nothing, and you manage yourself prudently for nothing. But if you don't save the cash and there is no bailout, then you go out of business. So this randomness, and of course, this is a topic that has been heavily explored by anti-Bitcoiner, Nassim Taleb, who's talking very, very deeply about this stuff. It's like we just don't know. So we need hard money. Hard money entirely fixes this, because hard money forces natural law and doesn't force random intervention from random institutions. Because this is an issue of mismanagement. This is an issue of mismanagement. That merger should have gone through, but unfortunately, we'll never know. We'll never know. So if money is hard, there's other good things that happen. The race towards low-cost options ends if money is hard. Why? Because your wages, presumably, and your money, presumably, suddenly retains its value. And flying, of course, is scarce. Flying is mostly energy. It requires a lot of energy. And so that's why it didn't retain its value. That's why flying is more expensive than it used to be. But if your money keeps its value, then you don't have to chase low costs all the time, because your money just kept its value. Also, I have a hot take. This is a bit off topic, but still important to realize that low-cost airlines, frankly, they're just not that cheap anymore. If you want to carry on, and if you want to pick a seat, and by picking a seat, I mean you want to avoid being in the middle seat. If you want that, low cost is essentially the same price as Delta, United, or American. Like if you want to be guaranteed to not sit in the middle seat, and if you want to have a carry-on, do the math. It's roughly the same. And even though I can go without a carry-on for a short trip, I can do a personal item. Seat choice, I don't want to have the middle seat. Never, right? It's like really, really bad. It's just as bad as going to a dealership or getting a root canal. So I don't want to have a middle seat, and so that's why Delta, United, American is usually the way to go for me. But some, and that's probably why also some people didn't like the experience of flying with Spirit Airlines, because if you really want to save 20%, then you have to only have a personal item. Which your personal item may be big and you get charged, and then you make a scene at the airport because you're upset they charge you for your personal item. Then you have to have that, right? Then you have to sit in the middle seat. And so people are not going to have that good of an experience. But here's the bigger problem. Losing Spirit on popular route, losing competition is the problem, because the big three can now rent seek. They can now charge much more because one of their biggest competitors is gone. And I think that's the bigger problem. I think having a low-cost airline was keeping the cost down for everybody, because you always had Spirit showing up in the flight search engine, taking the prices down and kind of moderating Delta United American into charging at least somewhat reasonable prices, like 20 to 25% more than Spirit, but not twice or three times as much. So now that it's gone, this is unfortunately a big win for rent seeking. And of course, as a Bitcoiner, I fundamentally believe that rent seeking is a thing of the past. It's the 20th century, and that's not going to bode well. And I think if they rent seek too much, if the big three rent seek too much, you will have another airline trying to break in that industry. And of course, this is a pattern across the world, right? You go to Europe, you have EasyJet, you have Ryanair. You go to Asia, you have Air Asia, you have what is it called? Lion Air. Infamous, that one. You go to India. You have Spice Air in India. Anyways, the low cost, there's gonna be a new low cost competitor come. But how with regulation, with the speed at which these things move, how long is it gonna take, right? How long is it gonna take? And is Frontier gonna double in size? I don't really know what's gonna happen. Anyways, I'll conclude this video talking about a strategic solution. There is a strategic solution to winning in the airline business, which is close to what Southwest used to have. Unfortunately, Southwest was taken over by rent seekers. Southwest has now gone full rent seek. There is no distinction. There is no pick your seat at random. All of the stuff that made Southwest somehow has been removed, which is very sad if you ask me. But we'll see how that does for Southwest. I don't think that's going to bode well for them. But I think there is somewhere a 0-to-1 strategy that can apply into airline. Like there's an entrepreneur somewhere, I think, who can bring a 0-to-1 strategy to airline. And what is a 0-to-1 strategy is to provide a great product at a low price, right? A much better product at a low price, right? How would you do this strategy? How would you do this strategy for the airline business? How could you achieve low fares and a great product both together? Which, if you achieve that, that's going to be the winning combination. And so here are some ingredients of my solutions. First of all, you'll note, of course, that Spirit, that was 2,000 union employees. They tend to be union pilots. Sorry, they tend to be very, very highly paid. So what you would do is you would try to have non-union pilots. That would be a way to save on costs, and preferably your pilots, your employees, you wanna base them in a very low cost of living state. I think Mississippi is the lowest cost of living state in the United States. So why don't you have much of your crew actually based there, so you can pay them less without them feeling the bad impact of lower pay because they happen to live in a very low cost of living area, right? So base the crew in a very low cost living area, base the pilots, non-union, in a very low cost of living area. That's one leg of a solution, right? Another leg of a solution is get away from big airports. I booked a plane not too long ago looking at the fees in my biggest Texas city airport. The fees are insane. The fees alone from the airport, both ways, those fees alone make it that you literally can't have a low-cost flight because of the fees of the airport, because we're doing insane construction at the airport and you got to pay for it. You're going to pay for it as a traveler. So flying away from big airports is a way to avoid these government fees that can be so high on flight tickets. And so, for example, in the US, that could be something, instead of like a Cleveland, Ohio to Houston, Ohio, you could have a Youngstown, Ohio to Beaumont, Texas, direct. And then family or friends drive an hour to drop you off and pick you up, right? Or 2 hours, depending on the city you're in, right? But and of course, a lot of people traveling on Spirit, right? We are going to see family. right? Spirit, that's going to be a tough Thanksgiving if you're looking for a cheap option for Thanksgiving or holiday or anything like that. And of course, what is this model, right? Fly, and I'm not talking about Southwest strategy where they fly to what is it, Love Field in Dallas, or they fly to I can't remember, Midway in Chicago. They fly to these small airports, but these airports also happen to be expensive because they are within the city. I'm talking about the same as they do in Europe, like fly from London to Paris, but this is not London to Paris. This is actually Luton to Beauvais. And if you look at, and of course it's funny because they call it London, Luton, and Paris Beauvais, but it's a complete joke, right? Because you're totally not in Paris or in London if you fly from any of these. But that's one way to get the plane cheap. You get the plane cheap if you do that. And that could be a model for an actual great product at a low cost that actually takes over. And of course, the final solution, which I think airlines need to start to do, is vertically integrate. So why don't you own a major part of an airport? Why don't you buy a small airport and make it your own branded airport? Right? Vertical integration on the airport side, because that's a big part of the cost. Why not refine your own kerosene? I know United does some of that, right? And of course, it's a joke, but vertical integration would be, why not build your own plane? Now the regulation is just too strong on this. That's never going to happen, I don't think. But that would be the idea. Like if you had a company who made its own kerosene, owned its own airports, built their own planes. If you add that, you could have a true low cost and a great product at the same time traveling solution, and you would have a 0-to-1 solution. And of course. And this is, I think, some of the thing that's missing on a lot of low-cost airlines is that they have not fully become stealth banks, right? Most of if you look at United or Delta, these airlines are stealth banks. They sell miles to credit card companies. They sell miles to their partners at huge profit. Right? They sell. These miles are their own currency that they create and that they sell at huge profit. And this is only something you can do if you are a much bigger airline. And unfortunately, I would argue that Spirit and now the last two standing, which are Frontier and Allegiant. I would argue Frontier, Allegiant, and JetBlue, they're not big enough to become stealth banks, where they can just print airline miles and sell it for an arm and a leg to credit card companies. They can't really do that. Had they merged, right? Imagine this: JetBlue, Spirit, Frontier, Allegiant, all merged in a giant low-cost network. Imagine that, and then you're big enough, and you can actually have a rewards program that's successful enough where you can sell those miles for a lot of money and become a stealth bank, which is a big part of a strategy that a lot of airlines have. So it's very bittersweet to me, the end of Spirit Airlines, because capitalism was working when that merger should have happened, and it didn't happen. And so now they're not getting bailed out. And it's good. That was the right solution, but we should have never ever been to this level in the first place. We should have never been to that level at the first place. That company should have been acquired by JetBlue. And by the way, a lot of people knew this was going to happen. A lot of people complained for years, really, have said that this is ultimately what would have happened. And this is, of course, ultimately what happened. So very, very unfortunate situation. Anyways, hopefully you like this video a little different. This was not investment advice. This is not financial advice. This is not flying advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.